Dimensions of the Daf with Rabbi Mordechai Becher on JBS is made possible in part by the B.L. Manger Foundation in memory of Ben Manger.
Hi, I'm Mordechai Becher. Welcome to Dimensions of the Daf, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, in which we explore different topics, which we base primarily on the Talmud. Daf, by the way, means a folio of Talmud, the great 20-volume compendium of Jewish law, ethics, philosophy, stories, history, everything imaginable. It's often called the Sea of Talmud because it indeed is like the Atlantic Ocean. It is huge, it is deep, and it has a major variety of topics covered, and pretty much any topic that you want to discuss in this world, socioeconomic, geopolitical, ethical, business, etc., is there somewhere in the Talmud. So this is not a continuation of a previous class. Each class pretty much stands on its own, so we're offering you it's like a poo-poo platter of Talmud where you can take little samplings of it, etc. I certainly recommend that you watch us every week, but you don't have to have seen the previous class to understand this class, or you don't have to see this class to understand the next class. So today our topic is love and marriage. Someone suggested love or marriage, but I call it love and marriage. I, thank God, have a good marriage, and I want to talk about a little bit about the Talmud's attitude to love, to male-female intimacy, relationships, etc. Obviously, it's a huge topic and not something we can cover in half an hour, but we will try. Let me start with a bit of a cynical and somewhat realistic view of how love works. This is by Erich Fromm in his book, The Art of Loving. I quote, "For the man, an attractive girl, and for the woman, an attractive man, are the prizes they are after. Attractive usually means a nice package of qualities which are popular and sought after on the personality market. I am out for a bargain. The object should be desirable from the standpoint of its social value, and at the same time should want me, considering my overt and hidden assets and potentialities. Two persons thus fall in love when they feel they have found the best object available on the market, considering the limitations of their own exchange values." It is beautiful. It brings me to tears to read this. But it's, wow, that is cynical. In other words, but unfortunately, it's very true of many people. That is to say, I look at myself as worth whatever, and if you're a man, you look at yourself as almost infinite, right? And I say, what can I get given my exchange value in terms of the personality market? And they fall in love. Very sad. Let me give you a little bit of a different perspective, I think. First of all, in the Torah, Genesis 1:27, there's a verse which is really strange. It says the following, "And God created the Adam," God created the human in his image. "In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them." Now, this sounds like the original human is described as an individual, the Adam, which means the human. In the image of God he created him, that's one person. But then it says male and female he created them. And this is well before Eve comes on the scene. So the Talmud gives us a very interesting answer. There's a Talmud in Ketuvot 8a, the Gemara says the following. Rav Yehuda pointed this out to contradiction. First half of the verse talking about one person, second half of the verse talks about two individuals, male and female. So he says this, originally God created the human as both male and female. In the end, he divided the human into two separate beings, one male, one female. That is fascinating. What that means is that the human, when we talk about a human, the complete human, at least in biblical perspective, the complete human is both male and female. God split that into two halves. So I remember we were discussing this once at our table at a Shabbat meal, Sabbath meal, one of my kids asked me the question, which he says, look, he says, I don't get it. If God wanted male and female to be together, he should have left them together. If he wanted them to split them apart, then why does he tell them to get back together again? Which is a good question. And I think at least one answer is, which is mine, it's usually the correct one, is that yes, God wants us to become one, but he wants us to become one under our own efforts. He created us as one to create the potential for that unity already at the beginning of creation. And he wants us to become one once again, but this time to achieve that oneness that already existed, but this time to achieve it through our own decisions, our own free will, and our own efforts, because only then is it really significant and meaningful. Now, and the Torah actually says in Genesis 2:18, God said, it is not good that Adam should be alone. Let me make him an opposing helper, Ezer kenegdo. That's the time that there's a split between the male and the female. Interesting, the word opposing helper is an interesting phrase, because either I'm helping you or I'm opposing you. How am I an opposing helper? So I think the answer is in the thumb. See, my thumb is an opposable thumb, which as most humans' thumbs are. As opposed to a panda whose thumb is only good for peeling bamboo, my thumb is useful for many, many things like texting and doing WhatsApps and stuff like that. I'm not sure what people use their thumbs for before smartphones, but like for thousands of years, they're just walking around and say, what is this for? Right? But anyway, the thumb is the greatest help for the fingers because it is opposite direction, right? And so sometimes I need someone with a different and maybe even an opposing perspective is the greatest help for me to understand the world. So the male and female have different perspectives, obviously opposing perspectives in many areas, but the combined perspective of this unit of man and woman is really the human perspective, because the human perspective has to include both male and female. And therefore, that requires a partnership. That requires a partnership which involves respect for each other, because if I have no respect for the opposing viewpoint, it's not going to help me much. And if the other has no respect for my viewpoint, not going to help them much. If we have respect for each other's viewpoint, each other's method of processing and of dealing with the world, etc., then we both absorb each other's, and that unit, known as this love unit of the man and woman, that becomes a unit that actually encompasses all of reality in a very, very real and stereoscopic way, not just mono. And then God said to male and female, he said, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, united with his wife, v'hayu lebasar echad. The meaning of that is literally, v'hayu lebasar echad means they shall become one flesh. We're supposed to become one. And interesting, and here I have to clear up a major misconception regarding procreation, excuse the pun. But the misconception is the following, that the Torah tells us in Genesis 9:1, God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the land and conquer it. That is a mitzvah, an obligation to have children. So we know, and that's not our subject of our discussion today, but there's an obligation to have children. Men and women should have children. And what's the minimum? 2, boy and a girl. Okay, but to have children. But that's one of the purposes of marriage, but that is not the only purpose of marriage. And in fact, that's not the only purpose of intimacy. According to the verse, this other verse which I quoted, 2:24, it says that the purpose of intimacy is v'hayu lebasar echad, for them to become one unit. So there's really a few goals in marriage. Number one is that my perspective on life should be a combination of both the female and the male perspective. The only way I can do that is if I have an equal partner who has a different female point of view, or she has an equal partner who has a male point of view, and those two points of view become the complete view of the world, both male and female, which are different. That's number one. Number two, procreation. Yes, we need children. We want to replace the world's we want to increase. God wants people in the world. He wants us to be populated. He wants us to propagate ethics and morals and monotheism. We only do that through our succeeding generations. And in addition, he wants us to become one, to achieve the unity that we once had before the split, and to have that unity. How is that unity achieved? So, and here a little explanation of the word love. Love, Rav Dessler says, is often used incorrectly. I'll give you an example. You go into a restaurant, the waiter comes over, he says, "G'day, mate. Name's Bruce, I'll be your waiter today." I say, "G'day, Bruce." And I say, "What's the special today?" He says, "Salmon." And I say, "Oh, fantastic, I love salmon." He says, "Really, do you?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You really love salmon?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, come with me, please." So I get up, I walk with him to the back of the restaurant. He shows me a fish tank. He says, "What is in the tank?" I say, "Looks like salmon to me." He says, "Yes, do those salmon look happy to you?" I say, "I do not know what a depressed salmon looks like. I would assume they're okay." He says, "Well, let me tell you, Mr. Salmon Lover, what will happen if you order salmon. You order salmon, we'll take the happy salmon out of the water. It will start to drown immediately. We then whack it over the head to hasten the death process. We'll then skin it, gut it, cut it up, and take its carcass, take its corpse, semi-cremate it over a grill, and then serve it to you. You call yourself a salmon lover? If you loved the salmon, you would buy the whole tank and dump it back in the Hudson River. Maybe the Atlantic would be better, but you could dump you. He says, "You're not a salmon lover." Now, is Bruce correct? I think he is right. I don't love the salmon. If I loved the salmon, I would actually buy it and sell it and put it back in the ocean. What I actually love is myself. And the sensation I get from eating charred salmon carcass is pleasing to me. If the salmon has to die for that, so be it. So Rav Dessler points out that that is what we mean when we say love. Very often we mean I love that. What I actually mean is I love me and I deserve that. Unfortunately, Rav Dessler says, Rav Eliyahu Eliezer Dessler, early 20th century Jewish philosopher, he says, unfortunately, we use the word love when it comes to a human being in the same way. I love him, I love her. So what very often what that means is I love myself, and what can I get from this person? What can I get from him? What can I get from her? And if they have to suffer a bit for that, so be it. Unfortunately, when I say I love him or her, very often it's the same as saying I love salmon, meaning it's self-love as opposed to love of the other. The Hebrew word love, ahava, actually the two middle letters, hey, veit, hav, is a biblical Hebrew word, which means to give. He says real love is the desire not to get, not the desire to take, not the desire to receive, but the desire to give. If I meet someone who I want to give to, I want to give myself to, I would like to, that is love. So love is not about taking, that's self-love. Love is about the desire to give. One of our great Kabbalists, Rabbi Mordechai, he actually talks about when the first time the Torah mentions kissing, it says that Yaakov kisses Rachel. Jacob kisses Rachel, and he cries. It's interesting. So he asked, what kissing is a strange thing. What's the symbolism of it? What's happening here? So he says, fascinating idea. He says it's the desire of one person to give the very breath of life to the other. It is an ultimate expression of love, because what it's saying is I want to give my very breath of life, my soul, to you. And the other is saying I want to give my soul to you. So it's an expression of mutual desire to give. Now, being a giver doesn't mean that I cannot receive. Because there is also an idea, if I give someone the opportunity to give, that is also being a giver. For example, if someone gives me a present and I appreciate it, and I say thank you, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of it, and I say, wow, this is exactly what I wanted, etc., I'm not a total taker, I've also given. And by the same token, if I give someone a present, and I only give them the present so I can get something from them, I say, here, I give them a comment, I say, nice tie, can I borrow $5? Right, then I'm a taker. So it's not the act of giving, physical act of giving or physical act of taking, it's the attitude, it's what's going on in the mind. If I am enabling this person to give and I'm appreciating it and I'm giving them the opportunity to give, I'm a giver. If also I am giving to someone, then I'm also a giver. So really, the man and the woman in a beautiful marriage are really giving to each other. And that is, sometimes they give to each other the opportunity, that they become a receiver to give the opportunity for the other to give. Sometimes they actually give. But either way, It is a relationship which is a healthy love relationship as opposed to getting. If each person's thinking not of what they can get, but what they can give. I'll paraphrase John F. Kennedy in his inaugural speech, very, very famously said that to my fellow Americans, I don't remember the whole quote, but he said something to the effect of, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. In our understanding of love, it's ask not what your spouse can do for you, ask what you can do for your spouse. Ask not what the other person can do for you, ask what you can do for them. Because that is a relationship which is based on giving. Now, the mechanism of unity is created by this act of giving. If I give to someone, then in a sense, I've invested myself in the other. For example, Rav Dessler points out that people have a sense of love if you're a gardener, if you like gardening. I do some gardening, not because I like it, just because it's, I have to mow the lawn. So, but a person who grows a beautiful garden, they plant the flowers, they arrange them, they prune them, they water them, etc., etc. That person has a feeling of affection and love for the garden. He says, isn't that strange? The garden, an inanimate object. If you built a house, in other words, you supervised every aspect of the construction, especially if you actually built it yourself, you'll have a love for that house, even though it's only bricks, wood, stone, cement, mortar, etc. What do you mean? What do you love? So Rav Dessler's analysis of this is that by investing, you've invested yourself in that house. You've invested yourself in that garden. So the little bit of yourself there. So it's actually, you've created a unity between yourself and the garden, yourself and the house. That's true even of an inanimate object. How true is that of another human being? When you've invested yourself in another human being, there's a little bit of yourself in them, and if they've invested in you, a little bit of them in you. So really, you are part of one unity. And it's interesting, there was a Rabbi Shimon Shkop who pointed out that even though we all have self-love, in my case, well-deserved, but we all have some level of self-love, and certainly we have an instinct of self-preservation. He says, how can we achieve that which it says in Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself? How is that possible? So Rav Shimon Shkop says, it's by the development of self, the sense of what self means. For example, the person on the lowest level, when they think of themselves, self means basically my body. That's it. That's who I am. And he says that's a very low level of self-awareness, consciousness, etc. A person who's a little more sophisticated, when they think of me, self, they include in that their mind, their emotions, their intellect. When I say me, I don't just mean my nerve endings and my stomach. I mean my brain, my soul. On a little more sophisticated level, they also mean their spiritual self, their free will, their morality, their ethics. That's all part of myself. When you're in love with someone and you say I, you also mean the other person. Myself has expanded to include one other person. You have children. When you say I need, what you really mean is my wife, my husband, my children. I has expanded now to include a whole group. When you have grandchildren, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, etc., then I has included them as well. On a more sophisticated, more refined level, I will include all of humanity. So, and on an even higher level, I includes all of existence. When a person thinks of themselves as just a very, very narrow definition of I, then yes, it's easy to be selfish, and it's very difficult to love someone else. When you understand that I has been expanded to include others, then you become, it's easy to love them, easier to love them, not necessarily easy, but easier. So marriage, building of a family, etc., and love is also a means of building that unity and expanding the self out beyond merely the confines of the narrowness of your body. I wish my body was narrow, but out of the confines of the narrowness of your body and expanding it to another person, other people, an entire community, an entire family, and indeed eventually the entire world. And that is, I think, an important aspect of the whole purpose of marriage. So And I should point out, apropos of this, in Jewish tradition, there is actually a commandment which is found in Exodus 21:10, Deuteronomy 24:5, which is that the husband is told there's a mitzvah called onah. Onah, literally from the word oneh, means to answer. It is to be responsive to his wife's needs. And here the Talmud says it refers to intimacy, and it refers to love, and it refers to physical love, and is which is completely independent of procreation. In other words, there's no possibility of having children for whatever reason, either medical or time of life or whatever it happens to be. There is nevertheless another aspect of intimacy which is part of the mitzvah of marriage, the obligation of marriage, which is to give pleasure. And giving of pleasure also unites people. The more pleasure that one gives, the more one is giving. Or rather, I should say, the more one is giving, then the greater the unity. And if what one is giving is emotional and physical and psychological and spiritual pleasure, then the unity becomes even greater. The Zohar, which is the greatest Jewish mystical text, the Zohar says an incredible thing. The Zohar says that the degree to which the divine spirit, the Shekhinah, rests in a home is directly proportional to the degree of joy and happiness between the husband and the wife. The greater the unity and the oneness between the husband and wife, the greater the degree of divine presence in the home. And one reason for that, again, scratching the surface of what the Zohar says, but one reason for that is because the divine presence, being that God is one, he is absolute oneness. Hear, O Israel, Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Oneness seeks out oneness. When there is unity in the home, when there is a oneness between the husband and wife, when there is joy and happiness between the husband and wife, then their home becomes a dwelling place for God, for the divine presence. And it's interesting, the Zohar doesn't say the degree of divine presence in the home is proportional on kosher food. Kosher food is necessary, but that's not what makes the divine presence. And it doesn't say that it's about Shabbat, and it doesn't say it's about the mezuzah. All these things are necessary, they are all mitzvot, they are all requirements, and they're all beautiful things. But the one factor which the Zohar lists as the primary factor of God's presence in a home is the degree of oneness, unity, joy, pleasure between the husband and the wife. I.e., when they are going back to the original oneness, they're getting closer. And the truth is, every time we get closer to oneness, we're getting closer to God. Many of our Kabbalists, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, of the most famous, he says that our purpose in this world is actually to create unity out of the plurality of this world. It's very much like a jigsaw puzzle. You see a jigsaw puzzle, beautiful picture on the front, you dump out the contents, now you've got 1,000 pieces. He says our world is like the 1,000 pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. So when the kid gets the jigsaw puzzle, remember my daughter used to like jigsaw puzzle, so you get the jigsaw puzzle and you find these straight edges and you find the corner and you start to build the picture, and then you see a little bit at the edge of the pond, right? And then you build a little more of the jigsaw puzzle, and then you see the mother duck, and then a little more of the jigsaw puzzle, you see the ducklings behind the mother on the pond, and a little more, and then you see the hunter with a shotgun, and more of the puzzle that she would see, the more joy there would be. Because the closer we come to that oneness and that unity means the closer we're coming to the source of everything, which is the oneness of God. And that's one of the reasons we feel joy in unity. Humans seek out unity in many ways. People go to football games, not only for the football, but they also go to the football game to have the experience of being part of 50,000 screaming fans, all doing it, screaming together, etc. There's a great feeling about that. Personally, I don't like it, but there's a great feeling about that. People like to identify with countrymen, with people with similar accents and backgrounds, and so on and so forth. We love oneness. We like to hear the harmony in music. In science, we like to see the line that connects the dots, the algorithm that explains the phenomena, people are searching for the grand unifying theory, for the theory of everything, for the thing that will unite all of the phenomena of creation, etc., etc. And that is at the root of the idea of male and female, the root of love is the pursuit of oneness. We believe the best way to pursue that oneness is, as we saw from Rav Dessler, is through the acts of giving in every way possible, whether it's giving physically or emotionally, etc. But it's the act of giving, and sometimes giving can be accomplished by accepting and being a graceful recipient of someone's kindness. Usually it can be by actually giving to someone, but that really is the idea of love. Is that the same as romantic love? Probably part of it is included in that, because mutual attraction, physical attraction, personalities complement each other, etc. It's not just a transaction. It's not just, for my value, who's the best I can get, and for her value, who's the best she can get. It's not that. It's something else. I've found, so to speak, to find one's other half, the other half of that unity that existed in the primordial world, and to create that oneness once again through acts of giving. That is, I think, one of the ideas behind love in Judaism, and something which I hope everyone will merit and somehow experience in their life. So this is Mordechai Becher. Some of these ideas, in fact, a lot of them can be found in my book, Gateway to Judaism. Feel free to pick up a copy. I shouldn't say feel free, because you actually have to pay for it. But anyway, Amazon and bookstores, and tune into Jewish Broadcasting Service. And if you do watch Dimensions of the Daf and you see me in your community, etc., please give me a shout out. It's always great to see actual people out there. So thank you very much for watching, and tune in next time. Mordechai Becher, Jewish Broadcasting Service, Dimensions of the Daf.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.